today, and the past few weeks, we've heard gospels that speak of vineyards. Each time I hear any of these gospels, I think about my grandfather. He came to the U.S. in 1921 from Pescara, Italy. Growing up, his family owned acres of vineyards, vegetable fields, and orchards. He grew up working the land, and he respected the land. Once here, things didn't go quite so well for him as he expected, but with perseverance, he kept working, and he finally was able to purchase a house in Eastwood with a decent-sized lot. Then his passion kicked in. He grew anything he could: tomatoes, peppers, squash. He even had peach and apple trees. What tied him to his family, though, and the land, was his grapevines. They stretched alongside the house from the front to the back. He told me that when he first planted the vines, they yielded the most sour fruit. Back in Italy, the vines they grew on the family farm always had sweet grapes and made excellent wine. At first, he thought he would get the same results. Once he tasted his grapes, he knew he had work to do on the soil. He spent years working the soil around the vines and caring for those vines himself. He would always tie them up in the spring and cut them back after harvest. He would condition the soil in both spring and fall. He tended those vines like he would his own children and grandchildren. His work paid off as the grapes got sweeter each year. It was a lot of hard work, but he had faith that he could grow grapes as good as the best, and he didn't give up. He didn't lose faith. Losing faith makes us do things we may not ordinarily do. It's possible that the people in the gospel today had lost faith in the landowner. They lost faith that they would not receive what was promised them, so they killed any messenger from the owner and tried to take the harvest or the reward for themselves. I'm sure we all see the parallels. The landowner representing God, the landowner's son as God's son, Jesus. The landowner's son being killed for what he represented as Jesus was crucified. That analogy seems easy. The part not easy is that God does demand the work from us in return for our reward. And he will take the kingdom away and give it to a people that will produce fruit, as the last line in the gospel says. The vineyard is to life here, as heaven is to life after here. Vineyards played an important role in parables that Jesus told because they played an integral part in their lives. The grapes were used for drink. They would be eaten for nourishment as fruit or dried to make raisins or used in jellies. The leaves were used in cooking or left on the vines as shade. Birds made their homes in the cover and could be caught for food as well. They were a major source of income, and people continually tended the vines and conditioned the soil to keep the vines viable. They had great respect for the vines. The respect they had for the vines also showed in the respect they had for life. As my grandfather respected the land and the life that grew from it, he respected people as well. This weekend is Respect Life Weekend. It's more than the envelope that we'll be putting into the second collection tonight. It's more than the fifth commandment. It's a way of living our life as we give respect to all God's creation, people, animals, and land. We are living this respect for life, showing it through the crop walk, where we are walking in solidarity with those people in developing countries who walk an average of 6 miles every day for food, water, fuel, and to take their goods to market. We should have respect for animals, and Father Bill will be blessing the animals tomorrow at noon. And we should respect the land by being good stewards of the land. One way is by developing the smallest ecological footprint we can. And that is no new idea. Today is the feast day of St. Francis. He lived so simply that we have made him the patron saint of ecology. But we must especially respect the life God has given us. I mentioned the fifth commandment. It means more than saying, "Thou shalt not kill." It calls us to foster the physical, spiritual, emotional, and social well-being of ourselves and others. We are called to create the culture of life and work against the culture of death. Each human life remains in a relationship with God, who is the final goal of every person. I mentioned earlier that when people lose their faith, it may make them do things that they would not ordinarily do. Like the people mentioned in the gospel today, killing because they lost their faith in that landowner, that he would take care of them as he promised. We must work hard to keep our faith, as my grandfather did tending his grapevines, as St. Francis did spreading the gospel, as we can do by prayer. In closing, I would just like to quote Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul. He said, "Where God is denied and people live as though he did not exist, where his commandments are not taken into account, the dignity of the human person and the availability of human life also end up being rejected or compromised."